"Sir, can you lift me up to see the sky?" asked the wheelchair girl to the CEO on the ferry deck. The ferry cut slowly through the dark water, its engines humming like a lullaby beneath the stars. It was nearly 9 p.m., late autumn, and the night air was crisp but gentle. Most passengers had retreated inside the cabin, away from the chill. On the deck, only the soft yellow glow from the overhead lamps remained, casting long shadows on the steel floor. Above, the sky stretched vast and clear, a dome of glittering stars suspended in absolute stillness. A soft gust of wind passed across the deck, ruffling the edges of a pale gray scarf. Lyra tightened it around her neck as she carefully pushed her wheelchair toward the railing. The wheels clicked softly over the ridges of the floor. She wore a thick, knit sweater, her blonde hair tucked behind her ears, a few strands flying free in the breeze. Her eyes, cool gray-blue like a cloudy sky before dawn, lifted toward the stars. But from where she sat, all she could see was metal. The railing was just too high. She tried to adjust the angle of her chair, then leaned forward slightly, but it did not help. The night sky, the one she had once memorized by name and constellation, remained half hidden behind the steel barrier. She let out a slow breath, not angry, just tired. A few feet away, a man stood alone near the railing. Tall, wearing a dark overcoat, hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable, he stared out at the ocean, phone in hand, screen lit but untouched. The sky was reflected in his eyes, but not in his thoughts. His brow furrowed slightly, jaw tight, as if trying to will something away. He turned, about to head back inside. Then he heard a voice, clear, soft, and close. "Sir, can you lift me up to see the sky?" He stopped. Turning, his eyes landed on her, the woman in the wheelchair. Her cheeks were flushed pink from the cold, her lips pressed together, but her eyes held something sharp and quiet. She did not look fragile. She looked real. He blinked. "You want me to carry you?" Lyra gave a gentle nod. Then, with a small smile, she said, "Just high enough to remember what I used to love." He hesitated for only a breath, then stepped forward, crouched down beside her, and asked softly, "May I?" She nodded again. Carefully, he slipped one arm beneath her shoulders, the other under her knees. She was lighter than he expected, not just physically. She leaned into him without fear, gaze already rising to the sky. Slowly, he lifted her and carried her to the railing. Then, gently, he sat her down on the metal bar, both arms still holding her steady. Her legs dangled, unmoving, but her spine stayed straight, her face tilted upward, her eyes alive. She reached out one hand toward the stars, fingers stretched like she was trying to touch the tail of a comet. A streak of light shot across the night, a meteor, brief and golden, and her breath caught. So did his. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. They stayed that way for a long moment. A woman who could not stand, a man who had forgotten how to rest, side by side in silence, looking up at something bigger than either of them. Then, her voice, barely above a whisper. "I studied the stars before everything changed. I thought I'd never see them like this again." He turned his head. "What happened?" She looked at him. Her smile was soft, quiet, like moonlight falling on broken pavement. "Life happened, but tonight, I remembered how small pain looks under a big sky." He did not answer. He just watched her, and for the first time in a long time, felt the weight in his chest ease, just slightly. Above them, the stars shimmered. Below them, the sea breathed. The camera pulls back slowly, a wide shot now. One man standing, one woman sitting, at different heights, but somehow perfectly equal, balanced between steel and sky, between silence and something just beginning. They look up, and the story begins. The little seaside cafe sat quietly at the corner of a sleepy street, its windows glowing soft yellow against the dark. Just past 10 p.m., the espresso machine hummed low beneath the gentle hush of jazz drifting from ceiling speakers. The door creaked open with the wind's arrival. Alden stepped inside, brushing the chill off his coat. He hadn't planned to stop. He only wanted something warm to take back to the hotel. But then he saw her. Lyra sat by the window, same pale scarf, same quiet presence, holding a cup of tea in one hand and a small notebook in the other, her wheelchair angled slightly toward the glass, as if watching the ocean even after nightfall. She looked up. Their eyes met. Recognition passed without words. They exchanged a polite nod, the kind shared between people who weren't quite strangers anymore. Alden paused, hesitated, then took a breath and stepped closer. "Would it be all right if I joined you?" Lyra tilted her head, then smiled softly. "Yes, of course." He sat across from her. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, just quiet, easy. For a time, they didn't speak. He ordered a black coffee. She sipped her tea, one hand tracing lazy arcs along the rim of her cup. Then Lyra broke the silence. "I'm on a healing trip. That's what my therapist calls it." He said, "Go see the places you dreamed about before everything changed." "So I did." Alden nodded. "Did it help?" She shrugged. "Not yet, but it's the first time I've done something just for me." Alden looked out the window. "This is the first time in over a decade I haven't packed a full schedule. No calendar, no meetings, just quiet." Lyra's brow lifted. "That's rare? For someone like me?" He exhaled through his nose. "Extremely." She studied him for a moment, then picked up her notebook and turned it toward him. On the open page, a messy, abstract sky, swirls of blue, dots of white, gold smudges bleeding at the edges. "I used to chart real stars," she said. "Plot them, measure their distances, map their movements. Now I just draw how they feel. Not accurate, but honest." Alden studied the page. It wasn't precise, but it pulsed with motion, as if the stars were in the middle of becoming something else. He didn't speak for a while. Then gently, "Maybe I should start drawing again too. What I used to want." Before I forgot, she looked at him. Their eyes held, not searching, just seeing. He closed the notebook slowly, then stood, reaching for his coat. Lyra followed. Her wheelchair moved quietly over the cafe tiles. They stepped outside together, not planned, not spoken, just together. The street was quiet, lit by hanging lamps and the faint flicker of a neon sign above a shuttered bookstore. The air smelled of sea salt and old wood. At the corner, they paused. Alden motioned toward the right. "My hotel's that way, just past the dock." Lyra pointed left, down a narrower street. "I turn here. My room's above the bookstore. I rent it from a friend of my mom's. Her name's Rose. She feeds every stray cat she meets and always forgets to lock the door." Alden smiled. "Sounds like someone worth knowing." "She is." They lingered there in the quiet. Then Alden said, "Good night, Lyra." She nodded. "Good night, Alden." He walked away. She watched him for a beat, then turned down the dim street, her wheels steady on the cobblestones. Behind her, the sea sighed. Above, the stars blinked, faint under city light, but still trying to shine. The sun had just cleared the rooftops when Lyra turned onto the cobbled street. Her hands moved easily along the rims of her wheelchair, familiar with every uneven stone along the way. The bakery sat at the corner, tucked beneath hanging flower baskets and the faint creak of a weathered sign. It was one of her favorite places, not because it was fancy, but because it smelled like things that didn't rush: butter, warm bread, and cinnamon. As she reached the curb in front of the shop, her front wheel dipped slightly, then stuck. The gap in the pavement caught her by surprise. She tried to back up, then push forward. Nothing. A voice behind her said calmly, "Need a hand?" She turned her head. Alden. He was holding a coffee cup and wore a gray sweater instead of the dark coat from the ferry. His hair looked slightly tousled, like he'd slept too little or walked too far. Before she could answer, he crouched down and gently lifted the front of her chair, guiding the stuck wheel over the lip of the curb like he'd done it before. No fuss. No performance. She blinked, a little surprised. Thanks. He smiled. Right place, right time. Well, now you owe me breakfast, she said playfully. Or maybe I owe you. Either way, you're eating. Alden raised an eyebrow, then nodded. Deal. They entered the bakery together. Inside, the air was warm and full of soft chatter from early risers. Most of the customers were older locals, people reading newspapers or chatting with the staff like it was part of a morning ritual. Lyra rolled to a small table by the window. Alden followed with a paper menu. She ordered a croissant and chamomile tea. He went for a cinnamon waffle and black coffee. They talked little at first, letting the food and morning light fill the space. It wasn't awkward, just peaceful. Then, somewhere between the first sip of tea and the second bite of waffle, a piano melody floated through the bakery speakers. Lyra froze. Debussy, Clair de Lune. She didn't speak, but Alden noticed the way her fingers paused over the rim of her cup. Keeps playing in your head? He asked gently. Lyra nodded. Her voice was low. I played it the night I got accepted to an astronomy summer program. I was 17, stayed up listening to it on repeat, convinced the universe was opening up just for me. Alden didn't say anything. He didn't have to. She took a breath and smiled. Not sad, just distant. Funny how music remembers things we forget. A few minutes later, Lyra reached for her croissant with one hand, still holding her teacup with the other. The pastry slipped slightly as she tried to cut it. Before she could adjust, Alden leaned forward and gently tilted her plate toward her. No comment, no look of pity, just an action done smoothly, like he'd done it for 100 people before her. She looked at him, eyes narrowing playfully. You did that way too naturally. He gave a half shrug. Not because you needed help, just thought, maybe my hands could make something easier. Her smile softened. That's the best kind of help. For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, the town was waking up slowly. Market carts being wheeled onto sidewalks, gulls calling faintly above the rooftops. Inside the bakery, it was still quiet. Still theirs. Lyra took another bite of her croissant. You always wander into bakeries this early? Only the ones that smell like real butter, he said, sipping his coffee. And only if I might find someone worth sitting with. Her cheeks warmed, but she didn't look away. They sat there until the coffee cooled and the tea grew pale. Until the morning didn't feel new anymore, but comfortable. And when they left, side by side again, neither said where they were going next. But they walked slow, as if wherever it was, it didn't matter just yet. The sun hung low, casting golden streaks across the narrow streets as Lyra led the way down toward the coastal park. The ocean glittered in the distance, framed by swaying pines and white fences. Gulls wheeled lazily overhead, their cries blending with the soft rustle of leaves. This is my favorite part of the island, Lyra said, her voice light, almost playful. Come on, Alden. I'm going to show you stars that don't need the night. Alden walked beside her, hands in his coat pockets, watching the way her scarf fluttered in the breeze. Stars in daylight? He asked, humoring her. Lyra smiled, glancing over her shoulder. Not literal ones, but they're out there, if you know where to look. The path curved slightly, opening into a wide grassy space with scattered benches and a view of the sea. There were kids playing near a swing set, an old couple feeding pigeons. A small trail ran along the edge, sloping gently downward toward the water. As they approached the overlook, a strong gust of wind blew in from the sea, sharper than before. Lyra gripped her wheels, adjusting her balance. Then, a jolt. One of the front wheels wobbled and suddenly bent inward. Her wheelchair jerked sideways, pitching toward the slope. Lyra gasped, struggling to hold herself upright, but the chair tilted further. Lyra! Alden shouted. He rushed forward and caught the armrest with one hand, bracing her shoulder with the other. The chair rocked once, then steadied. His breath was shallow, his hand clenched tight around the frame. Lyra froze. Her knuckles were white. And then, she exhaled, a shaky, broken sound. "I'm okay," she whispered, but her voice cracked. Alden knelt slowly in front of her, still holding the chair steady. Their eyes met, and then she broke. Tears spilled down her cheeks, sharp and sudden, as if something inside her had been waiting for this exact moment to collapse. "I hate this," she said, her voice raw. "I hate the feeling that at any moment I could become a burden, that I am a burden, that someone has to drop everything to catch me." Alden didn't flinch. He stayed at her eye level, his expression steady, quiet, present. "You're not a burden, Lyra," he said softly. "The burden is everything you've been carrying by yourself for too long." She stared at him, silent. Her lip trembled. Without a word, Alden reached into his coat sleeve and used the cuff to gently wipe her tears. Not rushed, not cautious, just human, kind, no pity in his eyes, no awkwardness, just care. For a long moment, the two of them stayed there, her hands still gripping the wheels, his hands still on her armrest, their bodies still from the chaos, but their hearts quietly rearranging something unspoken. When she finally breathed again, it came easier. "Thank you," she said, barely audible. "Any time," he replied. They continued on slowly, avoiding the sloping trail and settling instead under the shade of a pine near the playground. The wind had calmed. Children's laughter floated in the distance. A young boy, no more than 4, ran too fast chasing a paper plane and tripped. He fell hard, scraping his knee, and burst into sobs. Lyra instinctively raised a hand. "Can you?" Before she finished, Alden was already moving. He lifted the boy gently, bringing him over to where Lyra sat. She leaned forward, her tone suddenly warm and comforting. "Hey," she said, "you okay?" The boy sniffled, hiccuping through his tears. "You know," Lyra continued, "sometimes stars play hide-and-seek in the daytime. They hide behind the blue sky, just like you're hiding your bravery right now." The boy blinked at her, confused but distracted. "And do you know what happens when you cry?" she added, lowering her voice. "They shine a little brighter because they know you're trying." The boy's sobs turned into soft sniffles. He leaned against Alden's shoulder, calmer now. The boy's mother came rushing over, thanking them repeatedly. After she left, Alden looked at Lyra. Something unreadable passed through his gaze, part admiration, part awe. "You don't need to stand," he said quietly, "to make other people look up." Lyra glanced at him, her lips parting slightly. Then, for the first time since the scare, she smiled, not out of politeness or habit, but from somewhere deeper. The wind picked up again, but this time, neither of them moved. The rain came fast and without warning. One moment, Alden and Lyra were parting ways at the corner near the bookstore. The next, the sky cracked open with a rumble, and rain began pelting the streets in heavy sheets. "Come inside," Lyra called out, already turning her chair toward the side entrance of the old building. "It's closer than your hotel." Alden hesitated for only a second, then followed her up the short ramp and through a narrow hallway into her apartment behind the shop. The door clicked shut behind them. Outside, rain hammered the window panes. Inside, the quiet was heavy, save for the rhythm of the storm and the hum of the space heater. Alden stood near the door, brushing water from his sleeves, taking in the room. It was small but full of character. Tall shelves lined with astronomy books, watercolors tacked to the walls, a record player in the corner. It smelled faintly of lavender, soft and nostalgic, but his eyes were drawn to the far wall. There, slightly faded but lovingly preserved, was a large star map, not a printed one, but hand-drawn in delicate pencil strokes. Just below it hung an old, brown coat on a wooden peg. Next to that, on a small table, sat a shoebox wrapped in twine. He turned back to Lyra. Her eyes had followed his. "Is this your mother's?" he asked softly. Silence. Lyra rolled closer to the star map, staring at it with a blankness that was not absence, but restraint. "She drew that with me when I was 13, she said. "Every night that summer, we'd sit on the rooftop and add one constellation at a time. She said, it would be my first map home." Alden stepped closer. saying nothing. Lyra's hands moved to the coat. She brushed her fingers across its worn collar, then her shoulders shook. She worked 2 jobs for almost 10 years, just so I could study the sky. Her voice cracked. I got accepted to an observatory internship the same day the car hit me. A pause. Her eyes fell to the unopened box on the table. She got the call while I was in surgery, and when I woke up in recovery, she wasn't there. She'd had a stroke. Her words spilled faster now, trembling under their own weight. She never got to see me leave. I didn't even say goodbye before I left for the city that week. I didn't call enough. I thought I'd have time. She turned abruptly toward the box. I haven't opened her last letters. I can't, because if I open them, it's final. It means she really left. A sob caught in her throat. I should have been there. I should have told her. Stop. Alden's voice was quiet, but firm. He moved to her, pulled a chair close, and sat down without ceremony. Then he reached out, gently took her hand, small, shaking, and held it in both of his. Lyra, he said, you're not the one who made it happen. You're the one who had to survive it. Her chin trembled. The tears she had tried to swallow now came freely. Alden didn't look away. He didn't flinch. He didn't try to fix it. He just stayed. And that, somehow, made the walls crack. Lyra leaned forward, slowly, and rested her head on his shoulder, as if all the strength she used to hold herself together had finally asked for rest. Alden brought his hand up and placed it gently on her head, fingers threading into her damp hair. He stayed silent, present. Rain kept falling. Minutes passed. Then, from somewhere near his chest, her voice rose again, small but real. I'm afraid, she whispered, that people will leave when they realize I'm not whole. Alden closed his eyes briefly. I'm here, he said, when you cry, when you're silent, when you miss her. His hand pressed lightly against her back. I'm still here. She didn't say anything, but her hand curled gently around his wrist, not holding on, but letting go, just enough to allow someone else to stay. And for the first time, since the night she watched the stars from a hospital bed, she didn't feel alone. The morning unfolded quietly, cloaked in a silvery mist that blurred the rooftops and softened the edges of the sleepy coastal town. In the small upstairs room behind the old bookshop, Lyra stirred beneath her blanket as the distant cry of seagulls drifted through the open window. She turned toward the chair in the corner. It was empty. The spot where Alden's jacket had rested now held only absence. Her gaze dropped slowly to the seat cushion, where a scarf, his, lay folded with deliberate care. She stared at it, unmoving, as though it might explain something. It didn't. Her fingers curled around the soft wool, drawing it into her lap with a stillness that echoed louder than any sound. She knew this feeling too well. Gone. No knock, no message, no goodbye. Only silence where his presence had been. Her chest tightened. She pressed the scarf to her face, breathing in the faint scent of cedarwood and salt. For a moment, she stayed there, holding it against her lips like something sacred, trying to anchor herself. Then something inside her gave way, not loudly, not like glass breaking, but like paper tearing, slow, inevitable. A sound escaped her, fragile, unsteady. I should have known, she whispered, each word falling like a pebble into deep water. Of course he left. She closed her eyes, tried to hold it in, but the tears came anyway, warm and slow, trailing down her cheeks and falling onto the scarf in her hands. First the accident, then Mom, then him. She didn't need to name which him. The past and present blurred together in a single ache. They always leave, she said, barely above a breath, a line rehearsed in the quiet parts of her heart. Out at sea, a ferry carved its way toward the mainland beneath a heavy sky. Inside, Alden sat by the window, shoulders hunched, hands gripping the bench as if letting go might undo something already broken. The message from his assistant still glowed on his screen. Urgent capital letters, headlines exploding across news feeds. CEO, missing in action as crisis unfolds. He hadn't replied, hadn't packed with intention, hadn't looked back. He had just walked out. Now, with the island shrinking behind him and the shore ahead still distant, the weight of what he'd done settled over him like a storm. His reflection in the glass looked pale, drawn. "I didn't mean to hurt her," he murmured, voice flat. "I just didn't know how to stay without breaking everything else." But even to his own ears, it sounded like an excuse. Back in the room, Lyra remained in the same spot. The scarf lay in her lap, untouched. The candle she had lit the night before had burned down to a pool of wax. The morning light had crept in, but the room still felt dim, like it understood something had cracked. She didn't draw, didn't write. The journal on her desk remained closed. The sketch she'd started the night before, stars, loosely imagined, stayed unfinished. She simply sat there until even the tears ran out. There was no anger in her, just the deep, familiar ache of someone who had learned to expect departure, someone who understood that even the softest promises could unravel into silence. And for the first time since the accident, she didn't look up at the sky for comfort. Far across the waves, Alden sat with his hands clasped tightly, the scarf he kept in his coat pressed to his mouth like a quiet apology. His eyes were closed, as if to block out the world, or himself. "I wasn't trying to leave," he whispered, barely audible even to the sea around him. "I just didn't know how to stay, without becoming another thing she had to survive." But the ferry kept moving, and behind him, the little light in Lyra's window flickered, then went out. A week had passed since Alden left the island. No calls, no messages, no explanations. Lyra hadn't expected one. She returned to her quiet routine, easing back into the rhythm of her healing trip, sketching in the mornings, reading in the afternoons, and watching the sky fade without waiting for miracles. But something in her had gone quiet again. Her steps were softer, her gaze less searching. That evening, the sun had just slipped below the horizon, leaving a lavender haze behind. The market square glowed with lanterns and warm voices. Children ran near the fountain. Teacups clinked softly under awnings. Lyra sat near the edge of the square, a blanket tucked around her knees, sketchpad in her lap. She had chosen her spot carefully, where the first stars emerged and she could disappear in the noise. Her pencil moved slowly, tracing constellations of her own invention. They weren't found on any official star map. They were hers. A voice interrupted gently. "Still drawing the sky, dear?" It was Mrs. Florin, the elderly flower vendor from the corner, holding a bundle of lavender and rosemary. Lyra smiled, faint and tired. "Drawing the things that never leave," Mrs. Florin chuckled, warm behind her glasses. "Some stars don't show up in charts. Some only appear when we stop looking." Before Lyra could reply, the sound around her seemed to pull back, as if something just out of view shifted the air. She felt it first, a presence. Her breath caught. A figure stepped between the booths. No suit, no briefcase, no glow from a phone. Just Alden. She blinked once. Her pencil stilled. He walked slowly, silently, and stopped in front of her. Then, without a word, he crouched down and placed a small wooden box on the edge of her sketchbook. She looked at it, then at him. Her lips parted, but no sound came. His voice was steady, quiet, raw. "I brought something. To return a piece of the sky." She opened the lid. Inside were small wooden stars, carved by hand, names etched into their surface: Vega, Altair, Lyra, Orion. The edges were imperfect, some slightly burned. Tiny splinters marked places where he had slipped, signs that he had made them himself. "I don't have a speech, or a reason that makes leaving okay," he said. "This," he nodded at the box, "it's not an apology. It's just the best I could do when I realized I couldn't schedule you. Couldn't file you under someday." Lyra touched the stars, her fingers trembling slightly. Her eyes, wide and shining, never left his face. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. A single tear slipped down, landing on the back of her hand. Alden reached out, not to wipe it but to take her hand in his. No rush, no pressure, just presence. "I don't know if I deserve to be beside you," he said softly, "but if there's still space, just a small place where someone can sit and stay, could it be me?" She didn't answer in words. After a long pause, she nodded, barely. A movement so slight it might have gone unnoticed, but it was enough. Her gaze dropped to his fingers, rough, stained with glue, nicked with cuts. Not perfect, but real. And though there was no kiss, no embrace, something between them began to mend. Slowly, honestly, he had returned. Not with promises, not with apologies, but with hands that had carved stars. 1 week had passed since the stars in a wooden box brought them back together. Now, Lyra found herself on the rooftop of a seaside guest house, the kind with creaky wood floors and salt-worn shutters, perched just close enough to the ocean to hear it breathe. Alden had rented the entire place, not out of extravagance but because he wanted to do something reckless and a little wonderful, as he called it. He had spent the last few days building a makeshift lift by hand. Nothing high-tech, just rails, a hand crank, and wheels locked tight for safety. Everything designed so she could rise to the rooftop without needing anyone to lift her. And tonight, Lyra sat there, wrapped in a soft gray blanket, her chair resting securely against the wide wooden railing. The wind was gentle, brushing past her cheeks and threading through her hair. Above them, the sky stretched endlessly, darker, fuller, and deeper than it had been in a long time. Alden sat beside her, pulling a small projector from a canvas bag. He didn't speak at first, just connected a cable, then angled the lens upward toward the slanted wooden frame above them. "Do you remember the star maps you used to draw?" he asked quietly. She nodded. He pressed play. Soft beams of light began to dance across the roof's surface. A glowing sky bloomed into life, choppy lines, misshapen constellations, bursts of color mimicking ink stains and watermarks. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. "I digitized them," Alden said, his voice barely louder than the sea. "The maps you gave up on, the ones you said were only feelings, I made them real, not accurate, maybe, but real enough to see again." Lyra couldn't speak. Her breath caught somewhere in her throat as she watched her forgotten universe move gently above her. "You once told me," Alden continued, "that you thought you'd never see the stars the same way again. But you gave them names. You gave them meaning. You still do." Lyra turned to look at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "You know," she whispered, "I used to hate my legs." Her hand tightened slightly around the blanket, not because they were weak, but because they betrayed me. They didn't do what I needed when I needed them most. She paused. The wind picked up, lifting strands of her hair like they, too, wanted to fly. "But now," she continued, "I think maybe I was meant to sit, to stay grounded, so someone else could stand beside me, and we could both look up." Alden turned to her slowly, then lowered to one knee beside her, not to propose, not to promise forever, but simply to hold her hand like he had on the day she thought everyone left. "If you're looking for someone to stand next to you," he said, gently lifting her hand to his lips, "I've been standing here since the ferry." Lyra laughed softly, through tears this time. For the first time in years, she didn't feel left behind. She reached for his hand, not to be helped, but to hold, and the stars kept moving above them. Weeks later, on that same rooftop, Lyra opened her little art class for disabled children. She called it Touch the Stars. Every Friday evening, laughter and brushstrokes filled the air while she taught them how to turn feelings into galaxies. Alden stepped down as CEO. He became an independent scientific consultant, creating educational tools for children with mobility and sensory challenges, starting with a sky map designed after Lyra's. They never announced anything, never held a ceremony, but they lived under that sky, with the ocean wind and a rooftop garden of dreams. No vows, no rings, just a universe built slowly, patiently, beautifully, by two people who chose to stay. If this story touched your heart, If Lyra's quiet courage and Alden's quiet return reminded you that healing often begins in the smallest, most unexpected moments, then we invite you to stay connected. Subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more emotional, cinematic journeys like this, and if you felt something real tonight, hit that hype button to support the stories that matter. Every like, every share, helps us keep bringing light to the shadows and hope to the hearts still searching. Thank you for watching, and remember, some stars only appear when you stop trying to schedule them.